I ended up somehow working for an NGO or volunteering for an NGO in Sweden.
Oh, yeah.
When they took in some migrants during the situation that happened in Syria. And
well, they would be asylum seekers, wouldn't they, if they'd come out of Syria?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was so shocking to me because it was something that I was never really attached to. I really fell into it in the point that I moved to a really small village. One day somebody invited me to have dinner in the local community centre, and I never knew that they themselves, because they didn't have didn't have many black people, I didn't know that they themselves thought that I was a migrant, but they were too polite to actually ask. And just somehow I ended up eating a meal with all these other people, and I just later on found out, they think that I'm XYZ.
They thought you were a refugee.
I ended up volunteering for them and teaching English and doing language exchange with other people, because obviously a lot of these people don't know. They were in Sweden, but they were in the it's not a camp, but they were housed in a housing community centre, essentially, before they know where they're going to be distributed. And so one thing that I found so fascinating is that these people, I mean, this is why in all this conversation we've had, I've not actually said the word refugees.
No.
It actually dehumanises people.
But mate, I know you're right, but you see, I use the word refugee because the word migrant is so dehumanising, and refugee at least carries a what you might describe as a quality of compassion. Refuge being the source word. Refuge.
Weaponized.
Yeah, you're right.
It's been so weaponised by the end of it, I now just call them newly come Swedish people.
Yeah.
Because essentially
Recent arrivals.
And it was just so fascinating to see how, in my mind, everyone sees refugees as having a handout, looking for something.
Well,
but essentially, these people were doctors.
I know.
These people were lawyers. They just literally had unfortunate circumstances that brought them to our door.
Well, they fell foul of a disgusting government. It's pretty simple.
When I heard the story of one of my of somebody who basically came over on a boat from Libya to Greece and then made his way across. I couldn't believe. I know it sounds mental, but you've got to be a really brave person to do that.
Yeah.
And I know it sounds like an unusual word to use, but to get on a boat in the night, crammed with people you don't know. Not everybody is from Syria, so no one's even speaking the same language. That is some terror. No lights, because you have to be inconspicuous.
Yeah.
I actually felt terrified just hearing that. I couldn't do it.
No.
I know that I couldn't do it.
And you know, of course, that the response from certain quarters would be, "Why is it always men?" Yeah, I think you've just perfectly answered that. You know, you would take your chances as a man. As a woman, you probably wouldn't, or you'd be considerably less likely to. You'll stay and endure the horrors of home.
And as well, when I heard the stories of the young boys, because I predominantly was working with men and young boys, in my mind, I really had to. I couldn't even comprehend when they've told me they're young boys. And the reason why everyone says, why are they always walking around in crews? They have to make family with the people that they hang with.
Of course they do.
Because a lot of these boys were essentially, they didn't have their family anymore. And I couldn't believe when they told me they've managed to walk or somehow get from Greece to Sweden.
Yeah.
They had to walk, beg for.
You're still staggered, aren't you? You're still staggered by what you discovered, but also
we had to have therapy because of the stories. We had people telling us. I was just a volunteer to be told. Even people had to give sexual favours to get rides across Europe. I can't even walk from Zone 4 to Zone 1, let alone crossing the continent of Europe to get to Sweden. And what really fascinated me is the way that Swedish people tried to integrate them into society.
Yes.
In that, there's some municipality that I lived in dedicated a building for newly come Swedish people, and they offered free short courses.
But this is why, Dominic, we're going to run out of time, but this is why. But it's all right. No, what do you mean, damn it? You've played a blinder.
No, because I really wanted to say we had free cooking that forced Swedish people to come in because they were getting a free meal. That also meant that the Arabic-speaking people got to learn.
So come and meet these people, and then you won't be frightened of them.
So people were more friendly in a food environment. They were also socialising and learning about Swedish culture by seeing how they act. So it was by proxy or osmosis. They were kind of picking up the norms and values of the society they're in. They weren't hidden away in a camp. They were like understanding that Sweden sees equality for females and Sweden doesn't care about LGBT. And It was socialising through having people integrating, and the freedom of knowing that if you give somebody the language, they can be your doctor tomorrow, they can be your lawyer tomorrow, they can be your health worker. Or your
Dominic, mate, you are just what I needed at the end of the show.
I really wanted to get through and tell you the stories.
You've played a blinder, and you've also, I don't know whether you've done this wittingly or not, anybody confused about why Sweden was the favourite kind of whipping boy of Islamophobes and racists not long ago, there's your answer, because they were making a cracking success. Hey, don't get me wrong, there's problems in every country in the world, but the Swedes had to be portrayed as disastrous and as selling their own country down the river, because the alternative would be to admit that actually looking after refugees is the right thing to do.